This is something that only a few of you have actually asked me about in the comments, but I'm sure all of you are probably wondering deep in the back of your mind, if you're thinking about moving to Florida or living here, how often do hurricanes actually hit Florida? So today, I'm going to tell you my hurricane story, because you probably don't know it. You might have heard bits and pieces of it in some of my other videos, but today I'm going to give you the full story, and I'm going to give you some facts of exactly how often hurricanes do hit here and my opinion about all of this. Let me first start off by saying that I have been living here in Miami Beach now for about 12 and a half years, and out of that entire time, we have only had a mandatory evacuation order one time. And that was for Hurricane Irma in 2017, which was just recently. I realize not everyone might want to hear my full story about my hurricane experience, and that's fine. If you don't, I put timestamps down below the video because this is a longer video and I wanted to give people my full story for those who are interested in hearing about it, because I did go through a hurricane. And if you don't want to hear about it, you can jump straight to the facts, and then the last section is going to be about what I think about all of this and what I think you should do if you're going to be living here in Florida. Hurricane Irma hit in mid-September 2017. I'm not sure the exact dates, but basically the story goes like this. This apartment that you see me shooting this video in right now, we had literally just moved into this apartment the day before Hurricane Irma struck Miami. And the reason why we moved is because we had everything completely packed up. We had the movers paid and scheduled and ready to go, and it was all scheduled to happen on the Thursday, and the storm hit late Friday night, the very next day. And I figured if we canceled the movers, who knows, with the destruction this storm could cause, who knows how long we're going to be stuck in our old apartment with everything in boxes, our lease is over, etc. We didn't want to get stuck, okay? So our plan was, let's just do the move on Thursday, and we had plane tickets to leave Miami on Saturday early afternoon. So the plan was, we'll move on Thursday, on Friday we'll pack our essentials, and then Saturday we'll get out of town, right? Well, it didn't really quite work out that way. On Wednesday night, we got the call from the airline saying that our flight was canceled, and so we had no way to leave basically. We thought about driving, but my first thought was, if we drive, we only had my Camaro back at the time, and that car had already left us stranded a couple of times in the past, and the last thing we wanted to do was get stranded on the side of the road trying to evacuate for a hurricane. And on top of that, we saw in the news that a lot of people were getting stranded because there was bumper-to-bumper traffic trying to evacuate for miles out of here. And the prospect of sitting in traffic, not knowing if we could get gas, wondering if the car was going to break down, sounded a lot more scary and dangerous than actually staying here to ride out the storm. Hurricane Irma was supposed to be a Category 5 storm too, by the way, when it hit Miami. They were talking a direct hit to Miami just a couple days before the storm actually hit. The storm got lowered to a Category 3 hurricane, which is still bad, don't get me wrong, but not nearly as bad as a Category 5, and it ended up changing directions at the last minute. They were talking a direct hit from Miami a couple days away, and then like the very next day or the day before it hit, they were talking that it was going to switch directions slightly and go a little further south. And then Florida was thinking that we were going to be out of the woods completely on this one. Well, it didn't really work out that way for Florida, and it ended up smashing the Keys pretty hard and the lower west coast of Florida, like the Naples area, and it basically swept the entire west coast of the state of Florida. So there's almost nowhere in Florida you could have been that you didn't feel some effects from Hurricane Irma. And the fact that it was such a large storm, even though it swept the west coast, you could easily feel it way inland and possibly all the way over on the east coast. And the storm was so large that when it did hit, even though it didn't make a landfall in Miami, we were getting the outer bands of the northern part of the storm, and it was very strong. We're talking 100-mile-an-hour sustained winds. We could hear our hurricane shutters slamming against each other. It sounded like somebody was outside with a hammer just pounding on them the whole time for like 3 days straight. And basically how it ended up working out for us is we moved into the apartment on Thursday, We got stuck in Miami, and by Friday night we lost power. We didn't have any more running water by then. The building that we live in shuts down the water on purpose. I guess there's some kind of issue that can happen if they leave the water pumps running. I don't know. I'm not an engineer. But basically, they shut down the water on purpose, and then we lost power and cable and internet and all that stuff that goes along with the power. So we were sitting in our apartment, pitch dark, for 5 days, no running water, no air conditioning, no nothing. And it really sucked. We actually got really lucky though, in the sense that we decided to take the stairs down to the second floor because somehow we heard that there was power down there, and lo and behold, the second floor of the building did have full power and they had running water there. And that was great because on that floor, that's where we have the sauna and the gym, and the sauna has a shower area. So at least we were able to go downstairs once a day and take showers and then come back upstairs. The part that sucks is I live on the 18th floor. So we literally had to walk 18 floors down to the second floor and then all the way back up. And it was like 100 degrees in this building. I'm not kidding you, with no air conditioning, no air circulation, that humidity. It was suffocating, guys. The whole experience really sucked, and I would not wish it on anybody, and I don't recommend that anyone ever really goes through it unless you absolutely have to, kind of like we did. You know, I really wish there would have been some way for us to leave and just get out of here, but unfortunately it was either take a big risk driving my car or just stay and ride it out, and those were pretty much our options. Flying was off the table, so we decided to just hope and pray that the storm wasn't going to be as bad as they said it was going to be, and that's exactly what happened. It wasn't as bad as they said it was going to be, it didn't hit us directly, and overall we got pretty lucky, as terrible as that situation might sound. But let me give you some facts about hurricanes. Hurricane season starts on June 1st every single year, and it ends on November 30th every single year. So that's pretty much 7 months out of the year that we're at risk of getting a hurricane here. Technically, you can get a hurricane any time of the year, and there have been instances in the past where hurricanes hit outside of this time frame, but it's just not very common. The most common months out of the year for a hurricane to strike Florida is September and October, and since I've lived here for 12 and a half years, I can personally attest to that. That's usually when we see the most activity, and that's when we get the most hurricane watches and warnings every single year. So let me give you some more facts about hurricanes that you might find interesting. I did some research and I found this information from Wikipedia, and these are the amount of hurricanes that hit Florida between the years of 1900 all the way through present day. We got 108 tropical cyclones hit from 1900 to 1949, 1950 to 1974, there were 85. From 1975 to 1999, there were 83. And from the year 2000 all the way through present day, there were 79. About every 50 years, there's roughly 85 or so storms that hit. And actually between 1900 and 1949 was the most active time. And back then it had to be really scary because they didn't have all the warning systems and stuff like that in place. They would just be sitting around and one day a hurricane would show up. So that really had to suck. So we're pretty lucky. But basically what this comes down to is over the last 120 years, that means we've had a total of 355 tropical cyclones, and that means a tropical storm or a hurricane. Anything that has an I and spins counts in this situation. So we've had 355 storms make a landfall here in Florida over the past 120 years. But when you divide this out between 355 total storms over 120 years, that's about 3 storms on average. And one thing to keep in mind, this number does not count storms that almost hit us or ones they talk about in the news that end up going a completely different direction. These are only the storms that actually made an impact on Florida. And obviously none of this that I'm reporting to you is like scientific in any way. This is my own research. And as you can see from this table right here I'm showing you, out of the 10 most powerful storms to ever hit Florida, 2 of them have happened while I was living here. You got Hurricane Michael in 2018 and Hurricane Irma, which was the one from my story I told you about, in 2017. So literally 1 year after another. A lot of people are saying it's because of climate change. It could be, I don't know. I mean, living here in Miami, Climate change seems to be pretty real to me with the rising water levels and things like that, but that's a topic for another video. So here's what I think about all of this. Should you worry about hurricanes? Yes and no. Hurricanes are extremely powerful storms, and you surely don't want to be here for one if you don't have to be. But that being said, hurricanes are extremely rare in the grand scale of things if you look at how often a hurricane has actually struck Florida all over the past 120 years. And the other thing is, if on average only 3 storms a year make a landfall here in Florida, what are the odds that the storm is going to make a landfall exactly where you live in Florida? It's probably pretty rare. I mean, the odds are pretty much in your favor that even if a storm does hit Florida, it's probably not going to hit where you live. And if it does, you have a chance to evacuate at least. You get some warning ahead of time. And an important thing I want to mention in this video, guys, is as dangerous as hurricanes are, in Florida, we get some pretty crazy weather this time of year no matter what. And here's the perfect example. Yesterday, I woke up at 7:30 in the morning to the feeling and the sound of wind whipping against my building where I live. I mean, it had to have been at least a 50-mile-an-hour gust. It was very strong wind, and being through some really strong winds here before, I knew it wasn't just a little howl, you know. This was a really strong wind. And those type of winds cause their own type of damage as well, and they come out of nowhere. Those winds will blow furniture right off a balcony and cause property damage or ruin your stuff. They'll blow over trees. They'll knock down power lines. They'll blow tiles and shingles right off your roof. So those little storms that pop up in the summertime here can be just as dangerous, I wouldn't say dangerous, but just as destructive as a hurricane in a lot of ways. And on top of that, we've been getting rain here for like the past 48 hours nonstop. In fact, we had a flash flood warning here and that was like coming out of nowhere. Like it just wouldn't stop raining. And that's not really typical. This time of year, it's pretty typical that we get a couple hours of rain or a thunderstorm in the afternoon, but usually what happens, it'll rain for a little while and then it'll all clear up and it'll be sunny again like it never actually happened. But that's not what's been happening lately. It's just been non-stop wind and rain. And I'll bet you we probably had like 5 or 6 inches of rainfall in just the past 2 days. And that's why we had this flash flood advisory. Want to see that I am not kidding about this weather? Even as I'm making this video right now, look at this. This is the current state of affairs here in Miami Beach, guys. The storms have been off the charts these past few days. So much rain you can't even see a few hundred feet ahead. So I want to make that point that it's not just hurricanes that you're affected by this time of year in Florida. It's the little storms that add up too. And besides those storms, we also get tropical storms that move through here on a regular basis. And there's no evacuation order called for those or anything like that. But we will get tropical storm warnings. They'll tell you to take all your furniture off your balcony, bring stuff inside your house to, limit debris flying around, because that kind of stuff is what really causes damage and injuries. If you're walking down the street and a chair plows into you, you're gonna get hurt. But the one advantage we have to these hurricanes is you get warning. And being from the Midwest, I'm from northern Illinois, and it's pretty common that we get tornadoes up in that area. And I'm sure a lot of people that live in the middle of the country can relate to this. Tornadoes pretty much just pop up out of nowhere. And you get little to no warning when this happens. At most, I've seen maybe a 15-minute warning ahead of time. When one touches down, not far from where you live, you might get a little bit of a warning. But if you're unlucky enough to live in an area where it just touches down, you get zero warning, guys. The tornado just literally shows up in your backyard and you gotta run for cover in a matter of a minute. So that's not how hurricanes work. They can see them coming from hundreds of miles away, and they try to predict the path that they're going to take. They're getting better, it seems like, in recent years to predict the path, but at the end of the day, Mother Nature's in charge of the hurricane, and no man-made equipment can ever really predict where it's going to go. So the best thing, if you're going to be living in Florida, is to just be prepared for a hurricane. Have your evacuation plan in order, have it figured out ahead of time, like where you're going to go in the event of a hurricane if they do call an evacuation order. Because one thing that happened when Hurricane Irma hit is a lot of people that lived here on the East Coast, because they were calling for it to be a direct hit to Miami. What'd they do? They evacuated to the west coast of Florida. They went to the Naples area and Sarasota and all of that. And guess what? That's the area that got hit the hardest from Irma. So that was a very bad evacuation plan. I would never actually do that. If I was ever to evacuate for a hurricane, the only direction I would be driving, guys, would be north, because that's the only way you can for sure get out of harm's way. I know they tell us that you don't actually have to drive super far away to get away from the storm to be safe. They want people to be out of the areas that are going to be, having storm surges where the water surges 9-10 feet, above sea level or above the ground. That's super dangerous. People drown like that. And they want to get people just out of the immediate harm's way. But then what they do is they want to crowd everybody into like a school gym or something like that, and that's where you evacuate to, and you're pretty much living like that for who knows how long. So personally, I would rather make the trip and drive 6 hours completely out of Florida if I ever had to, and deal with whatever traffic might come now that I have the Jeep, something a lot more reliable to get out of harm's way, rather than just evacuate 30-40 minutes away and ride it out like that. I wouldn't want to do that. So never evacuate from one coast to the other is what I'm trying to say. I think that's very bad advice. Just don't do it, and it can totally backfire. Hurricane Irma was the perfect example of that. So my final thoughts on this: if you are living in Florida, definitely, if they tell you to evacuate, you should totally do it. I know I didn't do it, but we basically couldn't. So that's where we were at with it, and thank God we didn't, by the way, because my car a couple weeks later ended up actually breaking down. I had the fuel pump go out on the car, so it actually would have left us stranded if we would have made that drive and tried to evacuate, and that would have been so much more of a nightmare than actually staying here in our condo where we have hurricane shutters on all the windows. The building is solid concrete, so we had a pretty good chance of surviving the storm. But I would not recommend anyone to go through it, guys. If you have the chance to get away from the storm, definitely do it. Don't go through what I went through. I would never personally want to go through that again. The situation completely sucked, and the memory of that will be burned in my brain forever. I'll never forget it. Yeah, this was a long one, I know. I tried to get through this as quickly as possible, but the thing is, this story is, like I said, it's burned into my brain. And I wanted to share with you guys my full hurricane experience, so that way you can get an understanding of what it's like to actually go through a hurricane here, the facts about the hurricanes, and what you should do if one actually comes here. So I hope I answered all of those questions that you might be thinking about. And if you just can't get enough of hanging out with me, you go ahead and check out some more of my videos right over here, because I got plenty more where this came from. I guarantee you might not have watched one of those videos, so go ahead, go over there, check out one of those videos, and I'll see you guys over there.